وده المفروض اسمه ايه؟
رسالة جاية ده الميدان. سوق الميدان.
سوق الميدان.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Assalamu alaikum. Violent extremists have exploited these tensions in a small but potent minority of Muslims. The attacks of September 11, 2001, and the continued efforts of these extremists to engage in violence against civilians has led some in my country to view Islam as inevitably hostile not only to America and Western countries, but also to human rights. All this has bred more fear and more mistrust. So long as our relationship is defined by our differences, we will empower those who sow hatred rather than peace, those who promote conflict rather than the cooperation that can help all of our people achieve justice and prosperity. And this cycle of suspicion and discord must end. I've come here to Cairo to seek a new beginning between the United States and Muslims around the world. One based on mutual interest and mutual respect. And one based upon the truth that America and Islam are not exclusive and need not be in competition. Instead, they overlap and share common principles. Principles of justice and progress, tolerance, and the dignity of all human beings. But I am convinced that in order to move forward, we must say openly to each other the things we hold in our hearts, and that too often are said only behind closed doors. There must be a sustained effort to listen to each other, to learn from each other, to respect one another, and to seek common ground. As the Holy Quran tells us, be conscious of God and speak always the truth.
I was listening the speech, and then actually I didn't feel comfortable. Why the President of the United States coming to have a speech in Cairo and addressing the speech to the Muslim world? He started his speech with Salamu alaikum. This is like peace upon you. You know, this is the greetings from the Muslim countries or the Muslims. What about the Christians in Egypt? Don't you greet them? He also said something like, I'm proud to carry with me the goodwill of the American people and greeting of peace from the Muslim communities in my country. So I was wondering in that time, why the President of the United States carrying a greeting of peace from US Muslim communities? I mean, what about the Christians in your country? What about the Jewish? What about the Buddhists? What about whoever? And what does this opening, you know, say to non-Muslims in the United States and the Middle East alike? Then America and Islam are not exclusive and need not to be in competition. I mean, if you put America and Islam together in the same category, is this normal? I mean, this is a religion for 1,400 years, and America is, I don't know, 300 years old or something. I mean, you can't put a country, even if it's the most powerful country on earth, but you can't have a country and compare it to a great religion, and you just say America and Islam. You can't put both in the same category. So I was really kind of, I was not comfortable when I heard this speech. Is something going on behind this speech? During the 25th of January 2011 revolution, I was watching the reaction from the White House, from the Department of States. I was following. All I heard that in the very beginning, Mubarak is stable, Mubarak's government is strong, and they didn't care about all these people in the streets in the first days. And then when the Islamists ride the wave of the revolution and start to control the streets, start to use violence, they were shooting people. They had snipers coming from Hamas and these terror groups. They came during this revolution to help the Muslim Brotherhood to control the country. And right after we heard President Obama start to say Mubarak has to leave, now is now.
Anti-government activists have lashed out at the US ambassador to Egypt, Ann Patterson, for a statement in which she criticized street protests, just as the opposition gears up for mass protests against President Mohamed Morsi. Earlier this week, Patterson said she was deeply skeptical that protests would be fruitful and defended US relations with Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood as necessary because the group is part of the democratically elected Egyptian government. Her comments have been interpreted by some as referring to the planned 30th of June opposition-led protests. The day will mark Morsi's first year in power, and activists are using it as a rallying point. As a countermove, tens of thousands of Islamist supporters of Morsi held their own rally in Cairo on Friday, warning of violence during the upcoming opposition rallies. Prominent opposition activist Shadi al-Ghazali Harb said Patterson showed blatant bias in favor of Morsi and the Brotherhood, and her remarks had earned the US administration the enmity of the Egyptian people.
Right after the January Revolution, they sent the US ambassador Ann Patterson in Cairo. I think she was seen by large part of Egyptian society as a symbol of incompetent US middling. She is denounced, I think, for getting too involved in the Egyptian affairs or for backing the wrong sides, always the wrong side, and sometimes both. I think she brought misery to US diplomacy in the Middle East. The US ambassador Ann Patterson kept supporting the Islamists and particularly the Muslim Brotherhood. She wants to prove that this policy has to succeed, despite the facts that they are losers. They have nothing to do with economy, they have nothing to do with politics, they have nothing to do with social services, they have nothing to do with the daily services. They did nothing. All we got was only problems. We had to stand in front of the gas stations for hours. We had the power was cut every day, like 6 hours, 7 hours. They have no idea how to manage or to run a country. And the US ambassador was keeping supporting them.
The problem with the Constitution has started since the very beginning. The very committee that has established and articulated this Constitution should have included the civil forces of the Egyptian society. Unfortunately, they didn't have that chance, since the civil forces, the liberal forces, and the Egyptian church have withdrawn from the articulation. Another big problem we have encountered was the fact that many scripts have been issued for public discussions, but every time the public tried to discuss a script, a new script was issued. Consequently, the public didn't have the chance to discuss any script properly, and eventually 15 articles were added at the last day before, and then they have been voted upon without having any chance to discuss or give an opinion on. Liberal forces of Egypt have suggested an article which was going to be Article 73. Article 73 was against human traffic and slavery. For some odd reason, again, the Muslim Brotherhood have refused to include it in the Constitution, and the reason is they don't want to prohibit minors' marriage. By minors' marriage, we are talking about child marriage, which is deemed in all decent countries statutory rape. They were encouraging statutory rape in that Constitution, and this was something liberal forces have, for very obvious reasons, refused. Another massive disagreement between liberal forces and the Muslim Brotherhood was female circumcision. Since the Egyptian woman has been struggling for years and years to improve her situation within the Egyptian society legally, and there has been a law prohibiting female circumcision completely, Muslim Brotherhood have been insisting on removing this article and allowing female circumcision, which has been again refused for very, very fair reasons. Female circumcision is a horrible crime against humanity in general and the woman in particular. The interpretations the Muslim Brotherhood have stipulated within the Constitution would have included things that no normal person in their sane mind would accept. For example, there had been a fatwa that an adult can breastfeed from the female colleague because that would make her mahram to that person, which means he cannot sexually fancy her after he gets breastfeeding from her. This is obviously against all human acceptance and all human principles. Another serious fallout between the liberals and the Muslim Brotherhood was the issue of necrophilia. Because in the Islamist parliament, one of the Islamist members has suggested a law entitling a husband to sleep with his dead wife as long as it's within 6 hours of her death. I'm certain that every normal person would find that not only disgusting but utterly unacceptable.
نظري ان التمرد ليست صناعة لحدث، لكن تمرد كاشفة لحدث. بنفكر احنا عايزين نعمل حاجة تبقى مفيدة للثورة، بس انه عندنا تحديين، مشكلتين احنا بنتناقش مع بعض. الأولى انه الثورة بدأت تنحصر في الميادين فقط. يوم مظاهرة كبيرة تقلب اشتباكات خلصت بعيدة يعني عن الناس أو بدأت تبعد عن الناس، مع إن الناس أصلا إحنا متأكدين إنها مضايقة من محمد مرسي. اثنين، إنه أكتر ما يقلق هو فكرة العنف. بس فمن هنا بقى قلنا إزاي نعمل حاجة تنقل الثورة من الميادين للقرى والكفور والنجوع والشوارع والحواري، في نفس الوقت تاخدها من طريق العنف اللي ماشية فيه وتحطها على الطريق الصح، هو الطريق المدني السلمي اللي احنا مقتنعين بيه. فكانت الفكرة بقى انه قلنا حسن شاهين زميلنا واحنا قاعدين قال طب ما نسحب الثقة من محمد مرسي. قلت له حلوه نسحب الثقه محمد مرسي. تمرد ده بالمناسبه اسم مجله سوريه كان عاملها مجموعه من شباب الثوره السوريه. فخلاص استدعينا اسم تمرد، قلنا خلاص احنا نسميها حمله تمرد نسحب الثقه من محمد مرسي. بس بدات القصه بانه الخمسه المؤسسين كتبنا على صفحاتنا لاصدقائنا اللي احنا عارفينهم، صفحاتنا على الفيسبوك وقلنا وتويتر يعني، وان احنا بنعمل كذا واللي عايز يجي يشاركنا يشاركنا. فوجئنا بان في ناس جايه من المحافظات. عملنا الاجتماع الاولاني كان حوالي 50 واحد حاضرين. اهداف خروجنا حتى ننتقل من دوله سياده الرئيس لدوله سياده القمر، عشان كده احنا خارجين ندافع عن القمر. وبالتالي احنا بنقول ان هذه الاستمارات رغم حجيتها لعده اسباب، انا شايف ان الماده 5 من الدستور المصري بتتكلم عن ان الشعب مصدر السلطه والسياده للشعب بشكل واضح.
من محمد مرسي الله هنا 22 مليون 134,465. ونحن ندعو 22 مليون 134,465 مصري إلى التوافق غدا في كل ساحات التحرير وميادين التحرير وأمام قصر الاتحادية.
Yes, I was on the streets on the 30th of June. I was also one of the people that helped the movement called Rebel or Tamarrud in gathering people around that brilliant idea to sign papers. It's a new method, it's a new tool of democracy that has never been used before, and we were also the first ones here in Egypt to create what I term a public general assembly of the whole nation. And this is again another new tool. Getting 33 million people out on the streets rebelling meant simply that it was time to change things and get the power back into our hands, the hand of the people, and tell everyone that we've had enough. We've tried, we managed to allow them to try for 1 year, and they failed horribly in every possible manner.
The United States strongly condemns the steps that have been taken by Egypt's interim government and security forces. We deplore violence against civilians. We support universal rights essential to human dignity, including the right to peaceful protest. We oppose the pursuit of martial law, which denies those rights to citizens under the principle that security trumps individual freedom, or that might makes right. And today, the United States extends its condolences to the families of those who were killed and those who were wounded. Given the depths of our partnership with Egypt, our national security interests in this pivotal part of the world, and our belief that engagement can support a transition back to a democratically elected civilian government, we've sustained our commitment to Egypt and its people. But while we want to sustain our relationship with Egypt, our traditional cooperation cannot continue as usual when civilians are being killed in the streets and rights are being rolled back. As a result, this morning we notified the Egyptian government that we are canceling our biannual joint military exercise, which was scheduled for next month. Going forward, I've asked my national security team to assess the implications of the actions taken by the interim government and further steps that we may take as necessary with respect to the U.S.-Egyptian relationship.
Mr. President, with all due respect, I have news for you. George Bush was more popular in the Arab world than you are right now. The truth? Your indecisive, unclear, and feckless foreign policy has literally run our relationship with that region into the ground. And here's the rub. You've been giving billions of our dollars to countries who not only give us nothing in return, but who literally hate our guts. Remember these scenes from last year and that Arab Spring where you predicted good things were happening in the Arab world? The dawn of democracy is coming? But how long are we supposed to wait for that dawn? And how many sleepless nights do we have to go through to get to it? Ironically, it was your administration that threw Egyptian President Mubarak under the bus, in spite of the fact that all had been stable and secular during his 3 decades of his rule. And then you praised the speedy so-called democratic election of President Morsi of the Muslim Brotherhood, who then proceeded to suspend the Constitution, institute Sharia law, and tolerate, if not approve, of the victimization of Christians. And then, when the Egyptian people had had enough, you still support the other guy right to the very end. Your deputy press secretary says that this interim secular government should refrain from violence and resolve differences peacefully with the fanatical Muslim Brotherhood. This after your crack Secretary of State had just praised that interim government for restoring democracy. Hell, why make friends when you can make enemies by simply being your wishy-washy self?
Joining me now, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, Fox News strategic analyst and author of Hell or Richmond. Ralph, welcome.
It's great to speak
so much to talk about. And in terms of the White House reaction, he just detailed all of the different conversations that have been going back and forth between Chuck Hagel and his counterpart, John Kerry and his counterpart. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the White House statement was blessedly wishy-washy. And this is one of the rare times when a weak, a tepid White House response is in order. My greatest fear is that this administration, which is not thinking strategically but reacts to headlines, will try to cut ties formally with the Egyptian military. And there's a huge divide today, Martha, between the do-gooders and appeasers in the West who are concerned about this, and apparently in Egypt, the Egyptian people appear to support this military move, as the film clip you just showed demonstrated. The Muslim Brotherhood are thugs, and they're becoming terrorists. Their reaction was violent. They were not peaceful demonstrators. And ultimately, Martha, we need to keep our perspective and not be driven by headlines. The enemy of the Egyptian people and of the American people is Islamist extremism. The Egyptian army is not an ideal ally by any means, but they are a lot better than the medieval-minded bigots, thugs, and terrorists among the extreme Islamists in Egypt and elsewhere. For this is a regional struggle.
So it sounds like you're saying that, you know, what the White House needs to do is sort of watch all of this play out and not sort of, you know, crack down, not go after the military for this coup that they have brought about against the Muslim Brotherhood, which was democratically elected, but as you point out, turned to be not at all what the Egyptian people thought they were going to get during that election. You know, but you have to work these back channels, do you not? And is that not what Josh Earnest is suggesting the White House is trying to do right now?
Yes, and that's why I think the statement was, again, blessedly wishy-washy. Work the back channels. Don't grandstand. Again, all of this could have been avoided, Martha, as you just alluded to, had President Morsi not betrayed Egyptian democracy, this fledgling democracy, and tried to force Islamism on the bulk of the Egyptian people. I mean, he was elected on a protest vote, not because the Muslim Brotherhood has a majority in Egypt. And people rued that vote very, very quickly as the Muslim Brotherhood sought to dominate Egyptian life, force a Sharia-driven constitution on the Egyptian people. And so, yes, back channels, absolutely. And by the way, we need to get over our narcissism and recognize what's going on in Egypt isn't about us. It is about the people in Egypt and other peoples throughout the Middle East struggling against the fundamentalist extremists who are our enemies too. People struggling to build modern, decent, tolerant societies. And so far, the Obama administration's helped the wrong people by and large.
But, you know, I've heard that people on the street in Egypt are angry at the United States.
Yes.
And that you would expect to have some support, you know, essentially for understanding their plight, right, and wanting them to get what they want, which is a stable democratic government that can ensure a better economy, that can bring back tourism eventually in Egypt. That is their only hope. What can we do, if anything, at this point, to at least show our strength, show our support for what the people of Egypt stand for?
Well, we need to avoid knee-jerk reactions. I mean, you're absolutely right, Martha. The White House, this administration, managed the near miracle of alienating every faction in Egyptian society. First supporting Morsi against the freedom demonstrators, then belatedly switching to the freedom demonstrators, behind the army, not behind the army. I mean, this is the most amateurish foreign policy administration I have ever seen in my lifetime. It makes the Bush administration look like a bunch of strategic geniuses, and boy, that's something. But the bottom line is, we cannot determine Egypt's future. The Egyptian people have to determine that. We can only play on the margins, and we should try to play constructively and not automatically assume, ooh, military bad, peaceful protesters who happen to be thugs good. And I'm appalled by hearing so many Western commentators condemning the military and seemingly siding with the Brotherhood when the Muslim Brotherhood would put these people in jail or far worse. The Egyptian people want a little bit of freedom. The Muslim Brotherhood came to power and tried to take that little bit of hard-won freedom away, and now you're seeing the reaction. Again, I don't like military coups, but the real coup was what Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood did to that fledgling Egyptian democracy. We need to get our priorities straight, and our priorities should be on the side of modernity, tolerance, progress, economic growth, decency, not on the side of bigoted, medieval, primitive, hate-filled religion directed against peaceful Muslims above all, because we should also remember that the victims of radical, fanatical Islam have overwhelmingly been decent, everyday Muslims.
Ist wieder so eine zwiespältige Frage, aber ganz sicher für uns, die hier leben und hier eigentlich mehr Ägypter sind wie Deutsche und den größten Teil unseres Lebens hier verbracht haben, wir sehen es ganz sicher mit etwas anderen Augen wie ein Europäer oder jemand, der in einem anderen normalen, demokratisch regierten Land lebt. Aber man muss natürlich alle Seiten sehen. Für uns war es kein Coup in dem Sinne, was ein Militärcoup ist. Das bedeutet, um es mal zu definieren, ein Militär ohne Vorwarnung, mit Aufmarsch von Waffen und Panzern besetzt eine Stadt, besetzt eine Regierung, tötet oder nimmt den Präsidenten gefangen und überrascht das Volk, die diesen Präsidenten eigentlich gerne weiter behalten hätte. So sind sehr viele Militärcoups in der Vergangenheit abgelaufen und das war in diesem Fall ganz sicher nicht, eingetreten. Dass in diesem einen Jahr der Regierung von Morsi, die eigentlich eine Regierung der Muslimbrüder war, Morsi ein Frontman, eine Marionette der eigentlichen Muslimbrüder-Regierung im Hintergrund, die die Fäden gezogen hat, war. Und in diesem Jahr alles, was er je gesagt hatte, was er für dieses Land tun wird, Lügen gestraft hat. Und man erst mal gesagt hat, warten wir mal ab, warten wir bis zur nächsten Periode, die in 4 Jahren kommt, hat sich ganz klar herausgearbeitet in diesem Jahr, dass es zur Katastrophe gekommen wäre und sie ist schneller gekommen, als man jemals erwartet hätte. Man hat viel mehr, alle, die ihn gewählt haben, haben geglaubt, dass er zu seinem Wort steht und dass sich in diesem Land was bessern wird. Es hat sich aber nicht getan, im Gegenteil, es ist schlechter geworden. Und daraufhin, man kann es als zweite Revolution bezeichnen, daraufhin sind Millionen von Menschen nicht nur auf die Straße gegangen, sondern haben Millionen von Menschen befragt und unterschreiben und unterschreiben lassen, Unterschriften gesammelt mit Name, Adresse. Das waren also keine fiktiven Zahlen, die dann genug hatten. Und die einzige stabile Macht, die einzige stabile Faktor in diesem Land war und ist immer noch das Militär. Und das war eben dann diese Vereinigung zwischen dem Volk und dem Militär, um endlich wieder Hoffnung in dieses Land zu bringen. Und man hat es ja im Vorfeld angekündigt. Also ein Coup wird nicht 3, 4 Tage vorher angekündigt, dass er geschehen wird. Und man hat die Moslembrüder und vor allen Dingen Mursi direkt gebeten, an den Verhandlungstisch zu kommen, um endlich das Land wieder auf einen richtigen Weg und vor allen Dingen auf einen gerechten Weg zu bringen. Ägypten hat einen islamisch orientierten Präsidenten gewählt. Sie wollten aber keinen islamischen Staat haben. Und vielleicht müssen das die Menschen außerhalb dieses Landes wirklich mal feststellen. Das waren keine 24 Millionen Christen, das waren 24 Millionen Ägypter, wovon bestimmt 99% Moslems waren. Man will hier keinen islamischen radikalen Staat haben und da wäre dieses Land hingekommen. Die ersten Zeichen haben wir in diesem Jahr erlebt, auch wir selbst persönlich. Und das ist vielleicht der Punkt, der große Unterschied darstellt zu den Medien oder zu der Auffassung außerhalb dieses Landes. Dieses tagtägliche Geschehen, die tagtäglichen Veränderungen im Kleinen wie im Großen bekommt man natürlich außerhalb dieses Lebensbereiches nicht mit. Also, dass es dann solche massiven Proteste und Demonstrationen und dann auch die Gewalt gab, ist zu bedauern. Aber die Chance war da, dies zu vermeiden. Aber die Bewaffneten auf beiden Seiten, auf der einen Seite legal, ein Militär und die Sicherheitskräfte sind bewaffnet, das ist auch in Europa so oder in den USA so oder überall auf der Welt. Aber die Proteste, die auf der anderen Seite geschehen sind, die haben von vornherein diese Eskalation hervorrufen wollen, um eben als Opfer. Die Moslembrüder wollten immer als Opfer dastehen und das ist auch geschehen.
La situazione sicuramente è alquanto critica. Dal 25 gennaio più o meno del 2011 tutti i settori economici, soprattutto il turistico, stanno soffrendo molto. Ma io ho una grandissima speranza e fiducia nei confronti della polizia e dell'esercito perché stanno davvero facendo tantissimo per poter ridare serenità e stabilità al paese. Dal 30 di giugno di quest'anno sono scesi in piazza circa 40 milioni di egiziani che hanno dimostrato al mondo intero la volontà di questo popolo. E ci tengo a sottolineare cosa importante che deve essere assolutamente compresa fuori nel mondo, che non è stato un golpe militare, assolutamente, questo è stato un colpo del popolo, ovviamente supportato dall'aiuto e dal controllo dell'esercito. Eravamo tutti in strada, tutti uniti. Non c'era differenza fra musulmani, fra cattolici, fra copti, eravamo un popolo unico che voleva una cosa sola, volevamo togliere Morsi dalla nostra scena politica, perché in un anno di presidenza sua non abbiamo avuto nessun miglioramento, abbiamo solo sofferto molto di più e la situazione da abbastanza drammatica e critica come era prima della salita di Morsi al potere è diventata molto peggio nel corso di quest'anno perché abbiamo perso in tutti i settori, in tutti i campi. Penso che ci sia un disegno politico già stabilito da molto tempo. Credo che sia un pochino come giocare a scacchi su una mappa geografica. Ci sono degli interessi fortissimi da parte degli Stati Uniti dell'America che non fa altro, assieme a Francia e soprattutto a Gran Bretagna, di intensificare, di aiutare, di supportare quello che per noi invece è una sofferenza, cioè il terrorismo vero, il terrorismo portato da Morsi e dalla scia di fanatici con lui, quindi da quello che è la confraternita dei fratelli musulmani, perché non si possono definire come un partito politico assolutamente. Il popolo egiziano è sempre stato estremamente equilibrato, estremamente elastico ed aperto al mondo occidentale. Tornare indietro di 6.000 anni con le imposizioni che i fratelli volevano portare non era accettabile. Ecco il perché di questa di nuovo scesa nelle strade, questa volontà del popolo di cambiare le cose, ma cambiarle per avere un nuovo percorso democratico. E io credo che sicuramente ci vorrà qualche anno, non è una cosa che potrà accadere a breve termine, ma io sono fiduciosa che questo paese ha dimostrato tanta forza, tanta volontà, si rimetterà in piedi come gli egiziani sanno fare. Perché davvero devo dire chapeau al popolo egiziano e chapeau all'arma. Senza questa cooperazione non saremmo al punto dove siamo adesso.
Also in erster Linie sind wir aus gesundheitlichen Gründen nach Ägypten gegangen, sind aber schon seit vielen Jahren hier mit Ägypten verwurzelt, haben hier sehr langjährige Freunde. Wir fühlen uns hier sicher, wir fühlen uns hier wohl und wir sagen uns auch jetzt in diesen schweren Zeiten möchten wir gerne den Leuten zur Seite stehen. Nein, ich glaube, das ist eine Notwendigkeit gewesen, wenn das Land wirklich Freiheit und Ruhe haben will und in Zukunft auch wirtschaftlich gesehen nach vorne kommen will, ist das der notwendige Schritt gewesen. Es ist zwar schade, dass viel Leid dadurch entstanden ist, aber ich glaube, diese Bereinigung muss irgendwie sein.
Ja, absolut. Also ich habe überhaupt keine Probleme. Ich fühle mich sehr sicher auch mit unserer Tochter hier und ich bewege mich frei und fahre alleine selbstständig mit dem Auto durch die Gegend. Also ich habe keine Bedenken, weder für meine Tochter noch für meinen Mann noch für mich. Das ist alles okay hier.
نتعامل معاملة يعني يعتبر مهمشين في المجتمع وما كانش لنا دور إيجابي في تنمية سيناء أو إعمار سيناء أو أي شيء من قبيل من ذلك الشيء. ما فيش أي فرق، بالعكس ده البلد نزلت لمستوى أدنى يعني. أولا كان فيها انفلات أمني، ثانيا كان فيها يعني يعتبر يعني ما فيش عدالة اجتماعية، ما فيش عدل، ما فيش أي حاجة، وإنهم كانوا واخدين الدين كوسيلة إنهم يمسكوا مصر، ولكن يطبقوا الدين ما فيش أي شيء من يعتبر في تطبيق الدين يعني. والله أنا بالنسبة لي هم ما عرفوش أصلاً يسيطروا على الشارع. يعني إحنا عندنا هدف في جنوب سيناء نص والنص، تمام؟ ولكن هم يعني يعتبروا الناس تعاطفت معاهم باسم الدين، لأنهم استخدموا الدين كوسيلة للوصول إلى السلطة. الانتخابات بتاعتهم كان ممكن يوصلوا للوديان للناس اللي هم محتاجين، يدوهم مثلا كيلو سكر، كيلو زيت، ان هم يعني ناس خيرين والكلام ده كله. بعد ذلك احنا ما شفناش حد منهم في جنوب سيناء اساسا. انا مضيت وكنت برضه مساهم مع بعض مجموعه من الشباب لان احنا حاولنا نملى اكتر عدد من الاستمارات، وكانوا الناس بيحاولوا يعني كانوا بيسالوا عن استمارة التمرد 30/6، وكنا اول ناس لان كانت النزول بعد صلاه الجمعه، بعد صلاه يعني بعد صلاه الظهر. احنا نزلنا في الصباح، يعني نزلنا اول ناس في الصباح من الساعه 10، يعني كنا في مسيره في الشارع لحد محافظه ديوان عام محافظه جنوب سيناء، وكان يعني الناس كلها مستجابه لانهم يتظاهروا يوم 30/6. والله انا اقول ان الجيش نزل حقنا للدماء المصريين، لولا الجيش لو الجيش ما نزلش كان ممكن مصر دلوقتي يكون المصريين في بعض بيقتلوا في بعض. والله انا اتمنى المستقبل ان مصر تبقى دايما راسها عاليه، واتمنى ان الدول الغربيه تبعد عن مصر شويه لان ده شان داخلي، ولابد ان مصر تستقل برايها بحيث انها تبني اللي هو اتدمر في 30 سنه او السنه بتاعت الاخوان. انا مصري من النخاع.
It was funny when I heard some foreign ministers of the West, Europe. In Europe, they were talking about the military coup in Egypt. They were talking about, they were blaming and condemning the military coup. They call it coup, but it was not a coup. That was direct democracy. That was more than half of the voters of Egypt. They were in the streets, and the army had to follow the will of the Egyptians. We forgot when England had violence that was some few years ago. We had a real violence in the streets. They were burning London. And then the Prime Minister of England, Mr. Cameron, he said, hey, when it comes to my country's security or national security, don't ask me about human rights. And I don't understand these double standards. We also say, when it comes to our national security, the Egyptian national security, don't ask us about human rights, especially when we are fighting terrorists, killing innocents in the street, killing the minorities, killing Christians, burning their churches, and torturing people just because they have a different religion or different belief?
Yes, definitely. I was one of the people that voted for President Obama, and because I voted for him, I think it's my right to tell him that I am very disappointed. Very disappointed because I was convinced that terror, whatever or whoever is causing and inflicting that terror, was the enemy of any free nation and free people. And we've took it upon ourselves to fight terror. And it surprised me very much to find out that I'm left alone. Egyptians were left alone, and we were hoping to have the US in our back as an ally, because we have a common enemy. So Mr. Obama, it just puzzles me. What happened to everything we believed in and everything we propagated to the whole free world and to all the oppressed nations? We asked them to rebel against their oppressors, and when they did, they were left alone. So I'm really disappointed.
My last message, Mr. Obama, leave us alone. We will show you what democracy is. We will build our country in the way we want, because we want freedom, we want democracy, and we will accept nothing but freedom and democracy.